The protocol. That is what he called it. Not a philosophy, not a theory, not a collection of ideas he had read in books. A protocol. A precise, deliberately constructed system of thought, tested not in a laboratory, not in a seminar room, not in the comfort of a life lived without consequence, but inside a prison cell, on an island, in the cold Atlantic Ocean. For 27 years. The protocol is what kept him sane when they wanted him broken. It is what kept him powerful when they wanted him erased. It is what walked out of that cell with him, intact, refined, and more dangerous than anything his captors had ever feared. Because they had spent 27 years trying to destroy a man, and what they had actually done was forge one. His name was Nelson Mandela, and the protocol, his 100 rules for surviving, enduring, and ultimately transcending, is what you are about to receive. Not a biography, not a history lesson, something far more dangerous than that. This is his mind, distilled. 100 principles, extracted from decades of suffering and transcendence, offered to you right now. You can listen once and walk away inspired. Or, and this is what the rare ones do, you can use this as the soundtrack of your becoming. Put it on when you work. Put it on when you cannot sleep. Put it on when the world tells you that you are not enough. Let the protocol run in the background of your life until these words stop being his words and start being yours. This is his 100 rules for a powerful life. Before he was a statesman, before he was a symbol, he was a man sitting in silence, so complete it would have shattered most people. And in that silence, he did not panic, he thought. And what he understood, which most people only discover far too late, is that character is not what you display when things are easy. Character is the thing that remains when everything else is taken. Here's what he knew. Rule 1. It always seems impossible until it is done. He did not say this from a podium in a moment of triumph. He lived it from the inside of a cage before he ever had proof that it was true. Rule 2. Do not judge me by my successes. Judge me by how many times I fell down and got back up again. The world celebrates the arrival. He was asking you to honor the journey. Those are entirely different things. Rule 3. Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. He was not speaking about universities. He was speaking about the refusal to remain ignorant, about yourself, about the forces that shape the world around you. The most dangerous thing any system can do is leave you uneducated about your own power. Rule 4. The greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. There is no version of a meaningful life that does not include the fall. The only variable is what you do next. Rule 5. I never lose. I either win or I learn. He removed failure from his vocabulary entirely, not through arrogance, but through philosophy. Every outcome gave him something of value. That is not optimism. That is engineering. Rule 6. Difficulties break some men, but make others. He worked in a limestone quarry until his eyes were permanently damaged from the glare of the stone. The same conditions, different men, different outcomes. The difference was never the difficulty. Rule 7. Lead from the back and let others believe they are in front. His captors never understood. They thought they had silenced him. They had no idea he had taught an entire generation how to think without him in the room. Rule 8. There is no passion to be found playing small and settling for a life that is less than the one you are capable of living. He was 27 years behind bars when he held on to this belief. Let that land for a moment. There were no guarantees. There was no timetable. There was only the deep, unshakable conviction that the life he was built for was still waiting for him. Rule 9. A good head and a good heart are always a formidable combination. Intelligence without conscience is dangerous. Conscience without intelligence is ineffective. He spent 27 years cultivating both, because what came next would require everything. Rule 10. Resentment is like drinking poison and then hoping it will kill your enemies. He had every reason to be consumed by bitterness, every human reason. And he chose, deliberately and strategically, not to be. Because he understood that the stories we tell ourselves about our enemies shape us more than the enemies themselves. Mandela refused to let hatred write his story. Pause here. Before we go deeper, let us name what we have just witnessed, because these are not simply quotations. These are survival technologies. Every one of those rules was forged in conditions most people will never face, and yet they apply precisely to the life you are living right now. He was showing us that real character is not something you have. It is something you practice daily, in small, invisible moments that no one else will ever see. He was in a cell. No one was watching. No one was grading him. And yet, he chose every single day to remain whole. The great moral leaders of our generation have said it. When they go low, we go high. Not as a slogan, as a strategy. A refusal to be degraded by the degrading. Mandela understood this at a cellular level. He was not passive, he was not defeated, he was accumulating. Every year of imprisonment was a year of becoming. And here is the uncomfortable question these first 10 rules place in front of you. What are you accumulating right now? In your routine, in your reactions, in the quiet choices you make when no one is watching. Because those quiet choices are the ones that build the architecture of who you actually are. Hold that thought. Because what comes next is where this gets personal. If you have made it this far, and you can feel something shifting, there is one small thing being asked of you right now. Not for anyone else, for you. Take 10 seconds, leave this playing, save it to a playlist, or share it with one person in your life who is in the middle of something hard. Someone who needs to be reminded that the cell does not have to define you, that the waiting does not have to break you, that the suffering can be the making of you. This is designed to be listened to again. Put it on when you work, let it run. And now we go deeper, because we have only just begun to understand the most powerful part of the protocol, the part his captors never anticipated: forgiveness. There is something people misunderstand about Nelson Mandela. They believe his power came from his strength. It did not. It came from his wounds and what he chose to do with them. This is the part of his story that is almost never told, because it is too uncomfortable for a world that would rather have heroes than humans. Rule 11. I learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. He stood in the dock in 1964, knowing he might be sentenced to death, and he was afraid. He gave his statement anyway. Courage was never the destination. It was the direction. Rule 12. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. The world has sold you a lie about bravery. It has told you that the fearless person is the courageous one. But Mandela is telling you something more truthful. Every brave act is a frightened person deciding to move anyway. Rule 13. Forgiveness liberates the soul. It removes fear. That is why it is such a powerful weapon. Notice the word he chose: weapon. He did not call forgiveness a virtue. He did not call it a feeling. He called it a weapon. Forgiveness is radical power. Not what you do for the person who hurt you, what you do to reclaim yourself from them. Rule 14. If you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart. When Mandela walked into negotiations, he spoke Afrikaans, the language of his oppressors. He had learned it in prison, not to accommodate them, but to disarm them. Think about that strategy. Think about the patience required. Think about what it means to learn the language of the people who hurt you, not to excuse them, but to reach them. The bridge between divided people is built by the one willing to cross first. And crossing first is not weakness. It is moral leadership. Mandela crossed first, always. Rule 15. It is in the character of growth itself that we should learn from both pleasant and unpleasant experiences. He did not waste his pain. He studied it. What is this teaching me about human nature? About power? About what people are capable of? He emerged not traumatized into hatred, but educated into understanding. Rule 16. If I had my time over, I would do the same again. So would any man who dares call himself a man. There are people in your life who want you to regret standing for something. He had an answer for them. Rule 17. Money won't create success. The freedom to make it will. Rule 18. What counts in life is not the mere fact that we have lived. It is what difference we have made to the lives of others. He was not interested in achievement as a trophy. He was interested in it as a contribution. People who build around contribution report the deepest sense of peace, not because they are noble, because they have found a reason larger than themselves. A reason larger than yourself is the only thing that sustains you through the unbearable. Rule 19. A fundamental concern for others in our individual and community lives would go a long way in making the world the better place we so passionately dreamt of. Rule 20. There can be no keener revelation of a society's soul than the way in which it treats its children. He said this as a statesman, but he meant it as a warning that remains as urgent today as the day he spoke it. Now we arrive at the center of everything, because understanding the protocol is not enough. Understanding without action is just another comfortable prison. He did not survive 27 years to become a philosopher. He survived to act. And every rule that follows is a command, dressed in a language of wisdom. Listen carefully. Rule 21. After climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb. He said this immediately after his release. He refused to rest on the peak because he understood that the summit is not the destination. It is the vantage point. Rule 22. Real leaders must be ready to sacrifice all for the freedom of their people. Rule 23. One of the things I learned when I was negotiating was that until I changed myself, I could not change others. He did not begin with the system. He began with himself. Transformation is always an inside job. The man who walked out of Victor Verster prison in 1990 was not the same man who walked in. He had used the silence of captivity to rebuild himself for what was coming. Rule 24. I am not a saint, unless you think of a saint as a sinner who keeps on trying. He was not asking to be worshipped. He was asking to be believed in as a human being who simply refused to stop. Rule 25. If there are dreams about a beautiful South Africa, there are also roads that lead to their goal. Two of these roads could be named goodness and forgiveness. Not weapons, not armies. Goodness and forgiveness. That was his blueprint. That was his policy. Rule 26. Part of being optimistic is keeping one's head pointed toward the sun, one's feet moving forward. Movement. Always movement. Even when blind, even when slow, even when alone. The direction is everything. Rule 27. We must use time wisely and forever realize that the time is always ripe to do right. He did not wait for perfect conditions. He did not wait for permission. He did right, now, in whatever now he occupied. Rule 28. There is no easy walk to freedom anywhere, and many of us will have to pass through the valley of the shadow of death again and again before we reach the mountaintop of our desires. He said this in 1953. He had no idea then how literal it would become, and yet he walked anyway. Rule 29. I hate race discrimination most intensely and in all its manifestations. I have fought it all during my life. This was not rhetoric. This was identity. He fought because he could not imagine being the kind of man who looked away. Rule 30. A man who takes away another man's freedom is a prisoner of hatred and is locked behind the bars of prejudice and narrow-mindedness. He looked at his captors and saw them as imprisoned. He looked at himself and saw a man on his way to freedom. That refusal to accept the world's definition of who was free is one of the most radical acts in modern history. Rule 31. Overcoming poverty is not a gesture of charity. It is an act of justice. Rule 32. It is not our diversity which divides us. Since we have achieved freedom, there can only be one division between those who cherish democracy and those who do not. Rule 33. No one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin, or his background, or his religion. And then the line that should stop everyone. It is not just a statement. It is a diagnosis, and it is a cure. Rule 34. People must learn to hate, and if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love. For love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite. He believed, with evidence, that love is the default, that hatred is the deviation, that the work is not creating something new, it is returning to something original. Rule 35. Sometimes it falls upon a generation to be great. You can be that great generation. He always came back to young people because the defining choices of history are made by a generation that did not ask to be placed at the crossroads. You did not choose the moment you were born into, but you are being asked right now what you will do with it. Rule 36. There is nothing like returning to a place that remains unchanged to find the ways in which you yourself have altered. Rule 37. Let there be justice for all. Let there be peace for all. Let there be work, bread, water, and salt for all. Rule 38. The time for the healing of the wounds has come. The moment to bridge the chasms that divide us has come. Rule 39. We dedicate this day to all the heroes and heroines who sacrificed and surrendered their lives so that we could be free. He was the most famous man on earth at his inauguration. His first act was to make himself secondary to those who had suffered more quietly. That is leadership. Rule 40. I have walked that long road to freedom. I tried not to falter. I made missteps along the way. But after climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb. The road does not end. That is the privilege of a life that still has somewhere to go. Rule 41. Only free men can negotiate. Prisoners cannot enter into contracts. Rule 42. I stand here before you not as a prophet, but as a humble servant. Rule 43. If you want to make peace with your enemy, you have to work with your enemy. Then he becomes your partner. Rule 44. The world is truly round and seems to want all people to be neighbors. Rule 45. We must work together to ensure the equitable distribution of wealth, opportunity, and power. Rule 46. Honor belongs to those who never forsake the truth, even when things look darkest. Rule 47. There is no passion to be found playing small. Rule 48. Negotiating with people is not surrendering to them. Rule 49. I was called a terrorist yesterday, but when I came out of jail, many people embraced me, including my enemies. And that is what I tell others who are told that those who struggle for liberation are dangerous. Rule 50. Pain can be a gift if you refuse to let it be a permanent address. Rule 51. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. And then the line he delivered while standing trial for his life. The line he knew might be his last public words. The line that changed history. It is an ideal which I hope to live for and to achieve, but if needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die. The courtroom was still. His captors had expected defiance. They had expected anger. What they received was something they had no framework for. Serenity. The serenity of someone who had already made peace with the worst possible outcome, and in doing so, had become untouchable. That is the secret. That is the rule beneath all the rules. That is the deepest line of the protocol. When you have made peace with the worst, you are free to live your best. Rule 52. Real leaders must be ready to sacrifice all. Rule 53. Difficulties break some men but make others. Rule 54. I never lose. I either win or I learn. Rule 55. Any man or institution that tries to rob me of my dignity will lose. Rule 56. Resentment is like drinking poison and then hoping it will kill your enemies. Rule 57. A winner is a dreamer who never gives up. Rule 58. I am fundamentally an optimist. Part of being optimistic is keeping one's head pointed toward the sun. Rule 59. One cannot be prepared for something while secretly believing it will not happen. Rule 60. Appearances matter, and remember to smile. Rule 61. Do not look the other way. Do not hesitate. People look to you for leadership. Rule 62. To deny people their human rights is to challenge their very humanity. Rule 63. Nothing I fear more than waking up without a plan to bring happiness to those with no resources. Rule 64. Lead from the back. Rule 65. It is better to lead from behind and to put others in front. Rule 66. A good head and a good heart are always a formidable combination. Rule 67. Do not abandon principles for expediency. Rule 68. Talk to people in a way that reaches the heart, not just the head. Rule 69. Strength does not come from physical capacity. It comes from an indomitable will. Rule 70. The first thing is to be honest with yourself. Rule 71. You can never have an impact on society if you have not changed yourself. Rule 72. Many people in this country have paid the price before me, and many will pay the price after me. Rule 73. When a man has done what he considers to be his duty to his people and his country, he can rest in peace. Rule 74. Man's goodness is a flame that can be hidden but never extinguished. Rule 75. The greatest weapon is not a gun. It is a mind that refuses to be broken. Rule 76. I am not an angel. I am a man, and men make mistakes. What matters is that they keep trying. Rule 77. Your freedom and mine cannot be separated. Rule 78. I would like it said of me when I go, he fulfilled his mandate. Rule 79. There is no such thing as part freedom. Rule 80. Courageous people do not fear forgiving for the sake of peace. Rule 81. After one has been in prison, it is the small things that one appreciates. He meant this literally. The warmth of sunlight on skin, the ability to choose which direction to walk, a meal eaten without being watched. The man who once led a nation found his deepest gratitude in the smallest freedoms. The person who has learned to find abundance in small things can never truly be made poor. Rule 82. Reconciliation means working together to correct the legacy of past injustice. Rule 83. The secret of freedom lies in educating people, whereas the secret of tyranny is in keeping them ignorant. Rule 84. To be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others. Rule 85. Washing one's hands of the conflict between the powerful and the powerless means to side with the powerful, not to be neutral. This removes the possibility of passive innocence. It says, there is no neutral ground. There is only choice. And the choice not to act is itself an action. He knew this, he lived this, and he is asking from across time whether you know it too. Rule 86. What is painful is not the darkness of the long night. It is the unwillingness to imagine the dawn. He is not asking you to see the dawn. He is asking you to imagine it, to believe that the morning is possible. Rule 87. I dream of an Africa which is in peace with itself. He said this in his final years, still dreaming, still building, still pointed toward the sun. Rule 88. In my country, we go to prison first and then become president. He said this with a smile. He had earned the right. Humor born from survived suffering is one of the most human things that exists. He never lost it, not once, not even on the island. Rule 89. How can I be bitter toward those who have kept me in chains when I know that bitterness would only extend my imprisonment? This is the question he asked himself every day for 27 years. The fact that he kept arriving at the same answer is not sainthood. It is discipline. The most demanding, invisible kind. The kind that lives at the very core of the protocol. Rule 90. Tread softly, speak quietly, and remember that your legacy is not what you take, but what you leave behind. Rule 91. The Rainbow Nation starts with you. Not with government, not with policy, not with some distant change in the culture. With you. In the room you are in right now, in the conversation you will have tomorrow, in the choice you make the next time someone wrongs you, about whether you will return that wound or absorb it and refuse to pass it on. Rule 92. Real freedom is the freedom to create, to contribute, to become. It is not merely the absence of chains. Rule 93. I cannot pretend that I am brave and that I can beat the whole world. He said this because he was always honest about the weight. The most trustworthy leaders are always the ones who can name what frightens them. Rule 94. Peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is the presence of justice. Rule 95. Bitterness is a prison. I chose to leave it behind me on the island. Not at the gate, not at the podium, on the island, in the years before anyone was watching. He made that choice in private, never about performance, about survival. His refusal to let those who imprisoned his body also imprison his soul. A private decision, made alone, in the dark, chosen again and again until it became the man. Rule 96. There is a thread that connects all suffering, and it is the thread of choice. Not the choice of what happens to you, but the choice of what you become because of it. Rule 97. I have said this before, but I shall say it again and again and again. Your freedom and mine cannot be separated. Rule 98. Man's goodness is a flame that can be hidden, but never extinguished. This was his most fundamental belief. Not naive, not sentimental, earned. He had looked into the eyes of people who had done terrible things and still seen the flame. Dimmed, buried, surrounded by ash, but never gone. And because he truly believed it, he could negotiate with them. He could sit across from them. He could build a nation with them. That belief was the most powerful tool he ever possessed. The first line of the protocol and the last. Rule 99. After climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb. I've taken a moment to rest, to steal a view of the glorious vista, to look back on the distance I have come. But I can only rest for a moment, for with freedom come responsibilities, and my long walk is not yet ended. The walk never ended for him, not until the very last day. And even then, what he left behind kept walking, in the people he shaped, in the principles he demonstrated, not with speeches, but with the daily choice to remain human in conditions designed to strip humanity away. And now, Rule 100. As long as you and I breathe, it is not over. Not from a self-help book, from a man who lived inside a concrete room for 27 years and used that room to build a cathedral of the self. This was the protocol. Not a theory, a lived system, refined in silence, proven under pressure, and handed to you across time by a man who had every reason to give up and chose, every single morning, not to. Here is what he proved, beyond argument, that inner peace is not a reward for those who have had easy lives. It is a discipline forged in fire by those who refuse to let the fire destroy them. Real power is not dominance. It is knowing who you are when everything else has been stripped away. The long game always belongs to the person who refuses to become what hurt them. You have just spent this time with 100 distillations of that truth, and now one final instruction. Do not close this and return to the noise. Stay here. Play it again right now, while you work, while you move, while you build. Let the protocol run in the background of your life until these words stop being his and start being yours. He did not become Mandela in a single afternoon of inspiration. He became Mandela across thousands of quiet, invisible days. And the extraordinary thing is this: his practice looked like imprisonment. Yours looks like freedom. Imagine what you could build with that. This is 100 Rules for a Powerful Life. This is Nelson Mandela's secret to unstoppable inner peace. This is the protocol, and it begins every single time you press play.